Assalamu alaikum dear students, and welcome to 28th session of the KIPS Distance Learning Program Current Affairs Newspaper Roundup session. I am your host Shahrukh Haider, and the topic for today is what was the ill fate of the flight PK8303, what are the structural problems with PIA, and on a broader scale what are the problems with the state-owned enterprises in Pakistan and how to resolve them. This is an important question for you because in Pakistan affair there are chances that this question might appear in the 2021 exam, which means that there might be a question on what are the problems with state-owned enterprises and how to reform them. So this lecture addresses that question, and I hope that you listen with carefully and try to make notes. Also, I have attached all relevant content in the details section below. Make sure to press click more to access them. So first of all, what have the experts said about the dreaded fate of the flight PK8303? So recently the Aviation Minister Ghulam Sarwar presented a comprehensive report in the National Assembly which puts the blame on the pilot, the co-pilot, their lack of carefulness, their lack of attention and their lack of focus on the approach in Karachi. Secondly, the report has also placed the blame on the air control tower and its responsibilities and its personnel. Now there were a lot of other important findings that are presented in that report which are quite damning, so to speak. So let's look at what are the problems in the PIA, and we will cover the findings of that report in this section as well. So first of all, in the last 15 years, PIA has had 15 deadly crashes. Now this is a very high percentage compared to other, more known and more professional commercial airlines in the world. And according to Ghulam Sarwar, he thinks that this, PK8303 crash should also be associated with the coronavirus, and perhaps the casualties should also be added to the tally of the coronavirus, because the two pilots were actually discussing the coronavirus and its impacts that it had on their family members, which is why they lacked the attention and the focus that was needed to safely land the plane. Now, one of the major problems with the PIA and many other state-owned enterprises is overstaffing. There are too many people in each organization, much more than are needed, and they are an absolute burden and drain on the organization's resources, which in turn most of them, including PIA, are running in massive losses. Moreover, majority of these appointments in these state-owned enterprises are on the basis of political linkages, nepotism, favoritism and corruption. So out of the 860 total pilots that PIA has and are present in Pakistan, 262 cheated in the exam which gave them the flying license, and nearly 30% of the pilots have fake degrees and are not fit for flying, yet they are flying and they are considered as pilots. So this is a very major issue, a technical, human resource and an overall gross misconduct and gross negligence on part of state officials and state organizations responsible for monitoring the performance of state-owned enterprises. Another important problem is technical incapacity. So even though there is overstaffing in PIA and in many other state-owned enterprises, there is still a lack of technical expertise. The educated, trained professionals are not found in these institutions, in these organizations. What we instead find are people who have gotten their positions in these organizations through their political links, through nepotism and favoritism, right? Also, the fleet of planes that PIA has is very small, and majority of these planes have run their lifetime, yet they are still in operation and have not been grounded. Another important drawback or problem with PIA is that PIA's commercial viability does not exist. It's not a commercially viable airline, which means that it constantly runs in loss, does not make profit or even have a break-even situation. So in the last 10 years, PIA has accumulated a total loss of 50 billion rupees, 50 Arab rupees, which is a very huge loss for a state-owned enterprise, which directly has to be borne by the government, and it directly, burns a hole in the government's revenues. Moreover, government has to bail it each year. So this is the fate with majority of the large state-owned enterprises, that they are loss-making entities, and each successive government has to dedicate a significant portion of their budget each year to bail out these failing and loss-making state-owned enterprises. Now, this is one of the major issues with Pakistan's economy. To be very frank, there are a number of economic problems that Pakistan is confronted with. One of them, an important one, is the massive losses that the state-owned enterprises have made. So let's look at the overarching problem of the state-owned enterprises in Pakistan, which are too many in Pakistan, too much loss-making and too inefficient to let them go on the way that they're going right now. Business as usual simply cannot be allowed to proceed in these state-owned enterprises, because the laws that they're making and the burden that they're putting on each successive government is too high to ignore it. So essentially there are total 432 state-owned enterprises, and majority of them prove to be white elephants for the government resources each year. And if we look at the top 3 loss-making entities, the largest one being Pakistan Steel Mills, then PIA, then Pakistan Railways, these 3 state-owned enterprises alone have accumulated a loss of 200 billion rupees in the last 10 years, which is substantial now. Moreover, in majority of them, there is overstaffing, there is political appointment, there is nepotism, favoritism of family members, and majority of people are not even qualified or don't even have degrees to be in the positions that they have occupied. And majority of the staff is unable to work and fulfill the responsibilities that they are given. And the ratio of absenteeism in the employees of the state-owned enterprises is unbelievably high. Majority of these employees don't even come to their work for a year or even more than that, yet they keep getting the salary from the government expenses. For example, the Pakistan Railway has more than 72,000 employees all over Pakistan, which is unbelievably high for a company or a state-owned enterprise that does not have a large fleet of trains or a huge infrastructure all around Pakistan, or fast-moving trains or bullet trains or anything of that sort. Moreover, the collective bargaining power of the labor unions within these state-owned organizations and companies is too high. For example, the recent drive of privatization that the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf government has launched has met a lot of hurdles and roadblocks in its path. Why? Because, for example, in the case of the privatization drive that is going on with Pakistan Steel Mills, there are more than 8,200 employees of Pakistan Steel Mills, and the PTI government intends to privatize the entire steel mill and lay off all its employees while giving them very handsome severance packages. Even despite that, the PSM employees have gathered together and they have made a strong lobby of labor union to prevent the privatization of Pakistan Steel Mills. And that is the same case in majority of the large state-owned enterprises, that the employees in themselves have become a sort of mafias, which is constantly draining the national resources, national revenue, and not really adding any tangible financial or otherwise value to the country's economy. So what needs to be done? That is the essential question, and that is what you need to really think about. So, well, first of all, out of the 432 state-owned enterprises, many are inessential. For example, large hotels or many different kinds of functionaries and organizations that really don't serve any purpose for the government all around Pakistan. Many of them should be immediately privatized. The current PTI government has tried doing that. For example, it privatized a few organizations and companies in Islamabad that were originally state-owned, and much of that drive was successful. However, the PTI government has been unsuccessful in launching a massive privatization drive vis-a-vis large corporations are concerned, because the collective bargaining power of the labor which have been employed into these organizations unfairly and on the basis of nepotism and political appointments do not allow that to happen, and the government comes under their pressure and changes its tactics. Secondly, the ones who are too large or too important to privatize need to be restructured. So, for example, in the case of PIA or Pakistan Steel Mills or Pakistan Railways, there needs to be a very massive restructuring happen within that enterprise. And how that can happen? Well, first of all, the overstaffing needs to be dealt with. People need to be laid off, all of those people that are doing inessential jobs and are just becoming a burden on the finances of these companies, and essentially therefore on the finances of the government and the country. So they need to be laid off with severance packages immediately. Secondly, a board of governors or a technical assistant board or a trusteeship council should be created for the larger organizations, and this trusteeship council should be staffed with market experts for each company that have years of experience and who are given handsome market-based and market competitive salaries. And the primary motive that they are given and their task should be to reform these organizations and to bring them up to the mark and to make them profitable. Moreover, forensic audits should be conducted in all of these organizations to determine where money is being wasted, which resources should be cut down. So essentially a cost cutting operation should be launched in all major state-owned enterprises with a forensic audit to follow to see where resources are being wasted, which employees are not needed, what kind of structuring will be best for this institution, what assets should be kept and what assets should be sold, and what operation should be continued and what operation should be seized. A number of other important questions to make these organizations more financially viable and thus profitable and less of a burden on our country. Moreover, one important solution for that is also public-private partnerships, where a significant portion of that company is sold to the public, to the private sectors, to investors who can then run much of the affairs while the government controls the, or owns the controlling shares in that corporation, to ensure that government insight and government regulation still is in place, while market competition and private investorship can make those companies more profitable. So essentially that is how we need to approach the problem of state-owned enterprises and the massive white elephants that they have become in recent years, because it is essential for Pakistan's economic prosperity, for Pakistan's economic independency path, and to ensure that our yearly revenues can meet our targets, number one, and number two, we have enough revenue each year for the government to initiate massive development projects. Thank you very much for your attention.